Distinguished Senators, thank you for your service. Let me just acknowledge the importance of upcoming Saturday of Indigenous Day before I begin my remarks. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you to discuss the importance of Bill C-5, the One Canada Economy Act. It is indeed an honor to be here. Each day I have the privilege of representing over 170 business leaders who employ more than 2 million Canadians and create roughly 50% of the country's GDP. Founded in 1976, the Business Council of Canada's mandate is to help strengthen the country's economy, its social fabric, and its democratic institutions. My work takes me around the world, where I have the honor of meeting with Canada's customers, both those we have now and those we want more of in the future. I have to be honest with you, the last many years have been a challenge. I am asked repeatedly about how a country like Canada, blessed with resource wealth, world-class talent, and sophisticated capital markets, struggles to provide its trading partners with the goods they need to feel safe, secure, and to prosper. At the same time, Canada's economic and national security is under siege. Protectionist policies continue to grow, and our democratic institutions continue to be threatened. Our allies and trading partners face the same headwinds, and now more than ever are seeking to lock in safe and secure supplies of energy, food, and critical minerals. Our world-class resources, whether it's in uranium, nickel, potash, grain, oil and gas, compete in global markets. Unfortunately, we are losing market share. Once a top 10 supplier of many minerals and agri-food products, we're losing out to our competitors, of which many of them are in countries with weaker environmental standards and less respect for the rule of law. Our energy, our story is one of unfulfilled potential. LNG provides a striking example of where policy missteps and onerous regulatory barriers have kept Canada shackled and unable to reach its full potential, leaving us on the sidelines as other countries take the place that should have been Canada's as an energy supplier for the democratic world. Despite being blessed with enormous natural gas reserves and shores upon 3 of the world's 4 oceans, Canada has struggled to build the right infrastructure to move its energy products and resources to tidewater. Even just 2 months ago, S&P Global released a study where it found that it takes over 20 years to discover, approve, and build a mine in Canada, ranking us amongst the countries with the longest lead time in the world. This must change. Bill C-5 can get us out of the starting block and allow Canada to finishing first in the global race for trade. Our view, is that this bill and the powers assigned with it are appropriate for these challenging times. The bill provides a bold framework for governments to come together and work with the private sector and Indigenous communities to identify projects of national significance. Let me assure you that the private sector is ready to do its part, to invest and to build a strong and prosperous Canada. Our track record is second to none, and our ability to produce resources responsibly in cooperation with First Nations, it is Canada's competitive strength. Importantly, Indigenous rights and the duty to consult remain permanent features in Canadian law. Our members have made great strides over several decades to build a strong foundation of trust with First Nations through goodwill and enduring partnerships in major projects. And we stand ready to move forward with them today.
My question to Mr. Hyder, who knows his way around Ottawa very well in government, are you comfortable, Mr. Hyder, and is the industry comfortable that we can make enough use regulatory changes to strengthen this bill in order to compensate for some of the elements that are missing in it?
Well, if you're asking me, is the bill perfect? No bill I think has ever gone through here perfectly, and we can't let perfect be, the enemy of the good here. This is an existential moment. These are not normal times that we're in. We are facing a legitimate threat, if I can call it that, of our very sovereignty, about our ability to defend ourselves, about our ability to have economic prosperity and growth, that we control our controllables and not allow someone else to be able to do that. So these are not normal times. These are extraordinary times, and that's why we feel that this bill has the right objectives and the right intentions that we can work with to execute against its vision of how do we build more things in Canada. Frankly, any C-suite who has the duty, and as the board would, about the final investment decisions, will look at things not in the context of a single bill. It will look at it in a much more broader construct of where we find ourselves. And I think what you're seeing here is a willingness to sit down to work with our premiers in our provinces, to work with Indigenous groups, to work with the federal government, because truly this is a moment for all good men and women in the aid of this country to come together to find a way forward to be able to do what Canadians just had an election about, and which is how do we take control of our controllables, how do we diversify, how do we take control of our own sovereignty and not be beholden to a single customer whom we cannot blame for letting ourselves to be in that place. We're responsible for doing that. We are fighting tariffs tooth and nail with Americans as we impose them on Canadians for decades, which is what interprovincial trade barriers are. We're the ones who didn't build the infrastructure going east and west, and when Europe came calling and other countries came calling, we said, no business case, send you home, right? It's incumbent upon us to seize this moment to diversify, to build the infrastructure. Canada has no apologies to make. Canadian business has no apologies to make. We're proud of the record that we have with Indigenous communities, the work that we've done with municipalities and provinces in Canada. Has it always been perfect? Of course not. But over the last several projects now, if you look back at LNG Canada, within 2 years we were able to get that one done. Cedar LNG with Indigenous group partnership with TC Energy was able to move forward in the 2-year frame. So if the will is there, the way is there.
Mr. Hyder, in your view, does Bill C-5 effectively address Canada's two long-standing economic challenges, which are low productivity and weak competition? How will this legislation help move the needle on either front?
Thank you for your question, Senator. Every members' meeting, we survey our members, these chief executives, as I mentioned, of over half the Toronto Stock Exchange. And every single time, when we ask them, what's the most important issue that we can be working for you on, it has always been regulations. That regulations are the things that are standing in the way. You want to talk about competition, and if you go to Japan, Korea, they don't charge you for spectrum, but our telco companies have to pay here for spectrum, and so that money is being passed on, that cost is being passed on to the customer, so the rates are higher. If you talk to an airline and you ask, why isn't an American low-cost airline going across the border from Seattle or from Buffalo? It's because a $1 ticket becomes a $175 invoice, all driven by government regulations and taxes that are being collected. So we're not competitive, and we have to be honest with ourselves. We're having a hard time speaking to Canadians truthfully and candidly about the kind of country we can afford today. It is why we champion economic growth, that it is through growth, including the elimination of interprovincial trade barriers, which are the lowest hanging fruit to bring about growth, that will allow us to be able to do the kinds of things that Canadians expect us to do. The productivity issue is one I would say that many of my members would dispute the premise of the question, because with the greatest of respect, it includes public sector. And our view is if you separated the private sector from the public sector productivity, you would find that it's in the private sector DNA to invest in R&D, to innovate, to grow, because they're competing hard to stay ahead of their competition who's trying to beat them and or drive them out of business. But if you lump the two together, our productivity works lower. But I will tell you, most chief executives will tell you, I am constantly thinking about innovation and productivity gains and efficiencies so that I can compete with the global community in which I find ourselves. So the bill may or may not get to that directly, Senator, but I think in spirit, the intention of just collaboration, the message that we're sending that we're going to work together to try and overcome the confederation that we are and get stuff done, that will go a long ways, because this thing called the internet is available everywhere, and everyone has learned that we had to nationalize a pipeline to get it built. That we haven't built anything since for a very long time. I've often said if we were founded today, we would probably be a European Union, because there would be no highway, a national highway or a national railway. It'd be almost impossible to build by the rules and regulations we've imposed on ourselves. So that productivity gain is available if we're able to get out of our own way and build things in this country in all directions.
Thank you for that answer. Very encouraging. And I was very impressed with the fact that you said your network covers 50% of the country's GDP. That's amazing. We're honored to have you here today. Could you share insights on the consultations conducted with your network with the private sector prior to introducing this bill? And are they generally supportive of the model proposed in Bill C-5? What is the reaction? Are they supportive of that? I mean, 50% of the country's GDP. I'd like to hear from you on that.
That's an excellent question, and I will give them the respect that my members are owed, given that they are daily thinking about deploying capital which belongs to other people, shareholders, and to do that responsibly. They would like to do it in democracies. They would like to do it in Canada, but capital doesn't have that requirement. Capital goes where it grows, and so as they look at Bill C-5, they see directionally an intention, good intentions and goodwill. I was in Saskatoon with the Prime Minister and the First Ministers. You could sense a sense of coming together. But with the greatest of respect to our elected officials, you cannot legislate the deployment of capital. You can do everything else, but you cannot make anyone invest in your country. Your job, the job of legislators, is to create the conditions by which that can happen. And so there, as far as Bill C-5 goes, we are definitely mindful that there are other things. Irritants are probably not the right word, because these are big things, to say we're going to build infrastructure to get energy, in particular energy, to markets like Japan and Korea and so forth, who are running coal plants, so that we can get them LNG as a transitory fuel to bring emissions down, but have a tanker ban, and have Bill C-69, and have an emissions cap, and have clean fuel regulation. This pancaking of regulations is what deters that final investment decision to be made at the board level to say, well, hang on, I can do a lot more with this money somewhere else where I don't have these pancakes of regulations. They're welcoming me, and again, capital goes where it's welcome.
I'd like you, Mr. Hyder, to give me your point of view on this manpower and mobility.
Well, thank you, Senator, and I certainly agree with my colleague. There's a difference between mobility and availability, and I think what we're seeing is a little bit of both. I represent at least 6 of the largest builders in our country, and when I speak with the CEOs of those organizations, and especially when we're talking about housing, something nearly important and near and dear to the hearts of Canadians, what I hear is we lack plumbers. We lack the availability of electricians. We can't find drywallers. We can't find project managers. And so some of that may be a mobility question. They may be in another province unemployed, but they're not able to move to Toronto or wherever it is that we need them. But it also could be an availability question, which goes back to the issue earlier about immigration and making sure that when attracting the skills that we need for today and tomorrow are done in a way in which it's driven by labor data, as being pointed out. So I think we have to distinguish between availability and mobility. It's a combination.